Thank you, Travis. Yeah, my pleasure. So yes, I've been asked to share a little bit of labor market information as it relates to the utilities and energy sector. Just a little bit about what we do at the Bureau of Labor Market Information. I always like to say, basically, we collect information and share information on the residents of New Jersey and what they do. This includes a demographic profile, where they live, what they earn, what their education may be, in addition to what industries they may work in, the types of occupations, and their earnings. So that briefly is what we do there. So focusing on the utilities industry, you see some of the highlights that I pulled out. Um, Utilities is a relatively small industry. For instance, retail trade has 400,000 workers in New Jersey. You see here, utilities has about between 12 and 16,000. This has been a steady range since 2000, so it's a very stable industry. Looking at the demographics, you'll see that the workforce has grown older during that time. Old with more experience, but now as more people approach the age of retirement, that raises the question of backfilling those positions with younger workers. So that kind of relates to this career pathway discussion and how to fill that pipeline. Looking at the occupational makeup, you see that many occupations in the utilities industry don't require higher education. Many require only a high school diploma, maybe with some additional post-secondary training. Despite that, you'll see the average salaries are a lot higher than the statewide average. And you'll see that the utilities industry in 2019 paid over $2 billion in total wages paid. Next slide, please, Travis. So again, the utilities industry is relatively small. In fact, it makes up about only 1/3 of all employment in the state. Despite that, it accounts for about 2% of all New Jersey's GDP. You see here from 2000 to 2019, that number's increased from 6 billion, nearly doubling, to 10 billion in 2019. So despite the low employment, its impact is obviously felt. Again, looking at the occupational makeup, you see about 2/3 of all workers in the utilities industry are located or classified in these three types of occupations, that being installation, maintenance and repair, office administrative work, and then production occupations. These are the top 15 occupations in the industry, with one small caveat. When I pulled out the staffing pattern, I noticed that the long name is solar photovoltaic installers, solar panel installers, was not in there anywhere. I found that many of them are actually classified in our construction industry. So I did pull them out and put them on this slide. Those that are shaded are classified as either those types of construction workers or the aforementioned maintenance and repair type workers. And before we go to the next slide, if you go all the way to the rightmost column, you'll notice the high salaries. So the average salary in New Jersey is about 60,000, and you can see how many of those occupations in the utilities industry have an average higher, or in some cases much higher than the statewide average. So for me, this is where the data got a little more interesting, using information from our partners at the U.S. Census Bureau and the American Community Survey. As I said, we can get a full demographic profile. I ran these reports based on those who classify themselves as working in the utilities industry. So this graph shows 100% of all employment in the utilities industry over time. So what you can see is the topmost bar, that orange shaded area. Those are people in the utilities industry age 65 and older. And you can see it's small, but you can see it's steadily growing. In fact, that share of the industry has actually tripled to nearly 5% of all employment. You can see the next group down, that 55 to 64, so included that with 65 plus, now makes up about a third of the workforce. The next two, the purple and the green, this is your prime working age years, the 35 to 54 group, and you can see how much that has shrunk. In fact, it's shrunk from 2/3 of the workforce to now under half. And then the younger workers there at the bottom, you see not a lot of growth. So I think there's a story in here, and the need to replace those workers at the top of this graph as they approach retirement and then finally do retire is going to be felt in the coming years if those bottom two shaded areas aren't growing in time. Next slide, please. The top set of circles or pie charts here, you can see that it's overwhelmingly male dominated. 4 and 5 workers are male. It's less diverse than the economy as a whole. Classify themselves as being white, and also less diverse in that there are 9 out of 10 non-Hispanic workers in the industry. And this is my last slide. And for most industries, what we show and what we typically say is the more you earn, the more you learn, the more you earn. Looking at these two side by side, though, you see that's not really the case in utilities. About 90%, I'm sorry, about 2/3 of all workers there on the left have reported some college or an associate's degree or then less than high school. Yet look at the salaries over to the right. You've got 2/3 of workers reporting $5,000 or more, which shows me that in the utility and energy sector. I see the CTE and the community colleges as being a fantastic provider for filling that pipeline, and I will leave it at that. I think this is a very telling slide, and if anybody has any questions for me related to LMI, if you put it in the chat box, I'll be happy to answer.
Jason, thank you so much for that overview and for sharing this data with us.